Welcome everyone. Welcome to another Destiny Movie Night Hangout. I'm your host here, Mike, and I'm with the lovely guest June. Hi, June.
Hi. Hi, everyone.
And our hangout today is focused on the movie documentary COWSPIRACY. That's cow with a spiracy, not conspiracy, which I know in talking with a few people, they said, is the movie a conspiracy? And I said, no, it's Cowspiracy, which was really, if you watch the movie, just kind of like a clever play on a reoccurring point that came up. The director of the film was like super interested in the environment, doing his part to make this world a better place. He had watched the movie An Inconvenient Truth with Al Gore about climate change some years ago, and that had been a bit of a trigger point for him in taking regard for his participations here in this world. So he decided to go about ways in which he could reduce his carbon footprint. Now, in taking on these points for himself, which is cool because he's really like investigating things, is that he started to learn that the points being presented in Al Gore's An Inconvenient Truth about climate change was not the whole story, so much so that there's a lot of other relationship participations here that are influencing our climate and changes to our climate environment with regards to weather and just the destruction of our planet in a number of ways. So a big point that came up was agriculture, specifically how through the popular practices of agriculture for big business, where it's typically a sort of monoculture type practice, where it's based on like a single crop type of production, or like a sole focus being on, like, let's say cattle, cows, or chickens or whatever, and it's just all the land, all the area is just focused on mass production. And the interesting point within looking at that was the consequences of the consumption process. Like, there's specific attention given to cattle, cows, because, for instance, there's massive amounts of consumption in getting a cow up to size. Like, they eat hundreds of pounds of stuff a day, and that's quite a lot. So there was a correlation with the cattle farming and the destruction of rainforests, for instance, forests. And also, a big point of issue was the production of methane gas, because the methane gas wasn't really being recycled. There hasn't really been being recycled so effectively. So it's like we've been pumping massive amounts of methane gas into the atmosphere, and the numbers, the statistics show that the amount of like methane gas being produced in popular agricultural practices was something like 50% more than the total like consumption of like methane gas being produced through oil, and all transportation related processes. Now the numbers are quite staggering when you look at the regards about methane gas and the waste production just through that point, because what was found through this director's investigations is that none of the big environmental companies that seem like so passionate about climate change and regard for the well-being of the earth were in fact addressing like the consequences of how big business agriculture is existing, and really how in fact that it's like a major reason in the problems we're faced with today. And what was becoming more apparent with engaging these big, seemingly altruistic NGOs was that they ultimately didn't really care too much about the environment, the well regard, because it was a matter of business also, and that talking about a subject that may challenge the commonly accepted ways of behavior in our day-to-day living is not popular for political support. And there's like a whole realm of points here that basically you don't want to like say anything that is confrontational to the practices and ways of money making here in this world, because calling out acceptances and allowances that get in the way of the abuse of an accepted way of making profit is it's like regarded as abusive. And so these big environmental groups typically would not want to comment so openly about the fact that they were contributing a lot to the destruction, and the processes involved were not so sustainable in terms of the planet, our like human participation on the planet here. Yeah, so that paraphrase sums up the movie actually pretty well, but then it goes a little bit to another angle towards the end where perhaps veganism is the best alternative to reduce our dependency on eating meat, because the cattle point specifically and the other types of meat through animal agriculture were points brought into question. Yeah, so that summarizes the movie pretty well. June, jump on here.
Let me first give you a rhyme, just a short one. Milk is a white liquid that comes from the mammary glands of animals that nourish their young. Milk is used by humans to nourish their body when it needs nutrition that comes from dairy. Plants also have milk that humans use when the body needs nutrition from nut milks. There is interaction happening in physical existence where organisms interact in the ecosystem equal and one. Permaculture is the permanent cult that a human is part of. So we have to align our expression to the whole expression of life, which we are a part of. Team life is here, of which you are a member. See the physical as a team creating this world. That's my round for everyone.
Nice. Go ahead.
Yeah. I would like to comment about veganism because I was once a vegan, and I bought this this advertising that to be able to transcend killing of animals, I have to be a vegan. When in fact, I recently found out that it's about me feeling guilty about eating meat and really indulging in eating it. Not using it for nutrition, but rather using it for taste and the pure entertainment of it. So that is guilt, basically, that we're trying to transcend within that. But that is not the way to transcend it, because we are creating consequence outflow that is not really cool. Because you see, we either demonize dairy or we run for it. In India, the cows are being regarded as holy, you see, while in America, everyone's running away from dairy. No, I'm dairy intolerant. How much are you intolerant of dairy? I mean, can you take like 1/2 teaspoon of milk, you're not dairy intolerant. You can take a little bit of it. So that means maybe you just stick with that amount, you see. So that's my comment.
Some interesting points you bring up there, June, which, for me to like add on compliment with your point about veganism and vegetarianism and, meatism and fruitarianism and all of these different like isms that are created so much in a way, as like different lifestyle choices. What I find interesting about a lot of them is that, oftentimes the starting point, and obviously it's not necessarily the same for everyone involved, but as a general point, often the way they're presented in our cultures is that it's like, a way to do something that is against this other way of doing something. So like there's this conflict there that, this is the right way, doing it anything less is, more bad. And in watching this movie and in looking at, like the processes that are involved in the way agriculture exists so much so in big business, and seeing the amount of resources used to produce like a little bit of meat or some milk or some eggs, it did cause me to think about, the quote unquote American diet, if you will. And that was the point the director brought up as well, is like, so many of these things like meat, like eggs, milk, are regarded as like staples in our diet, as, like the things we have to have like every day as part of a balanced diet. Now, in watching this movie and reflecting on the point of veganism also, the point came to question is that I don't necessarily see the solution as that, it has to be like all or nothing, that you're either, for this or against this. But like you mentioned there with regards to dairy intolerance, is that, maybe it's simply a matter of more applying moderation and greater diversification in the things that we consume, so that, in a lot of ways these terms are irrelevant in a lot of ways, because like, we consume so many different things. It's not to have this like rigidity that I must, never eat meat or fish or poultry or whatever, and must only eat these things. Maybe, maybe you eat a big variety, and, maybe the dependency on meat or dairy or any of these things is in a way smaller proportion than what we're used to. Yeah. So you mentioned like yourself, for instance, you went from, going into like veganism to not being vegan. Is like what I mentioned kind of like the outlook, ultimately what you've come to for yourself with regards to diet, if you will?
Well, I see that these diets came about because we're trying to transcend this guilt, and we do it through this diet. But eventually, what I see is that in our plate, there are vegans foods there are vegetarian foods, and there are food with meat sometimes if we are not vegan or we are not vegetarian. And a vegan plate would have also vegetarians and vegetarian parts there, or fruits there, which is in a fruitarian diet. It's a matter of clearing these definitions, I think, because I can see that in the Philippines, it's not really a choice, because some people have very little money, so they can just buy a little bit of vegetables and fish, for example, if they're near the ocean. And then sometimes they don't even have fruit. Sometimes they only have air. And they don't eat 2 times a day, so they're partly breatharian also. So we just confuse these terms, and it was advertised as that, and people are making a lot of money from all this. There are gurus in every field. I mean, I can name them, but I won't. But what I'm saying is that this is driven by money, as you said. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's a fascinating consideration when, like, just through looking at this, movie, this point of agriculture, what came up for me was, in asking, looking like, is there a way in which there could be more of a synergistic like approach to working with nature and our relationship to eating food? Because the movie, it showcases the point of like big business so much so in that it's about consumption, 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 more, 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 because that approach brings more and more profit, more and more money. But if we look at like the processes involved in it, it's like, okay, you got to create more abuse, so to speak, to create more and more money. And the whole way in which we do that, because it's like a race to survive, and if you're not like fast enough in this race for survival to get the money, you'll die or perish away, kind of thing. And I find this all very interesting because it kind of leaves out the whole point of, a sense of community, a sense of togetherness here, that, all life is here. We're all here working together, but it's more of this like self-interested individual mindset of like a race, is that we're all, competitors, so to speak, like in this race. And if you look at how business exists so much so, it's like the idea of this, business, all businesses are in competition with one another, and to an extent, all consumers are in competition with one another, because it's about making sure that you can get what you want, kind of thing. And within that, there's not really a lot of time to slow down and think and enjoy yourself, quite frankly, because it's like the emphasis, if we even just look at how most of the labor exists in regards to these fields and all other related fields, of it being just so much so like go 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 go. Now if we bring this back all to like how nature works, life here really, it's very much a slowed down process, that if you look at the growth of things, it takes place over like lots of space and time. It's not just the bang 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 bang. And if you look at, like, for example, a forest, which is, there's a huge amount of diversity within a forest. So many different relationships need to exist in harmony, coexistence with one another together, in order for that like forest to exist and thrive the way like a forest exists, as so much like a self-sustaining environment. And this led me into learning a little bit about permaculture and ways in which permaculture like exists in recognizing how nature works, using like the methodologies within like nature, to be efficient in our self sustainability here. And I just find that to be like quite a fascinating area of regard, because the more we give regard to all of us being here like beyond our self-interest, what is possible, it seems, is methods, ways in which we can coexist here together that are like far better than the way we've accepted and allowed to do things, as being like all separated from one another, like with this disconnect where it's just like this unhealthy competition, if you will.
Right. What I can see here also is that cows are being manipulated by humans for this self-interest, because of money, and because um, the people who are making money out of our desires to eat nice uh, beef bourguignon or uh, steaks. You see, in our country where I grew up, I don't see the elite so much, especially in the town I grew up, because they're somewhere else, and there's in the big towns. But where I grew up, there's the middle class and the poor people. So um, the cows are not being raised for money so much so that it's being done here. Not like that. I grew up with people who have herds of cows, but they're very little compared to one that's being done here. And so the problem is not as big as you have here in the U.S. So also it correlates with one another, because the amount of food we eat, the amount of food we eat for the sake of taste is incredible. I mean, we have, for example, you're gonna be invited in one birthday celebration, then another anniversary celebration will come up the same day, and you will go there, and all this food is lying down there, and a lot of waste is being done too. So this is all a relationship and a consequence outflow of what we have accepted as humans, and our fears and desires in relation to food. That even animals and organisms, like our body and the animal's body and the plant body, they're all being abused. And guess who's the king? The humans, in search for more money and more. But then the consequence outflow is also there. Who's getting sick? So we have to really look at this.
Totally, totally. I think an interesting point that comes to mind, and the way countries exist, I think it exemplifies it quite well, is just the diversification of populations and climate, and within all that also how labor is separated throughout. Like, for instance, with the whole idea, well, with the ways we've accepted the ideas to be about how money exists and how our life exists with regards to working for money, it's like we've created all these like disconnections to everyone, everything else here. And so we're just like working harder for a less prosperous, like less great result. And the work that is being done is so much so in competition with one another that it's like there'll only be, so many winners out of it, and there'll be like a lot more losers. And yet, that's the kind of like motivation to keep working the way things are working, where it's just all like separated, like it just so disconnected with the harmony of everything here. Just the whole like outlook. I mean, I think it even goes into our generally like accepted way of thinking and looking at things here in this world. So much so where it's we get to be more narrow-minded, in like what's your interest, what's your passion, and so it's like, okay, that's your main point of consumption, so because you're into this, or you have a strong feeling about this, that'll be your point that consumes you in this world, or like how you can participate as a major consumer in this world that like helps destroy it all, kind of thing. It's kind of like we're perpetuating like how quickly we can die and like just obliterate the planet in so many ways. When I think really the solutions are so much so just backwards, like taking some steps backward and looking like how we got to these ways of being, that I think the whole life longevity, if you will, could be greatly enhanced just through having different structures in the way in which we like operate, first within ourselves and then with each other as our shared relationships here.
Yeah. And at the heart of all this is money. And I want to talk about money for now, because if that one thing is structured in a way that the money ecology kind of blends in and aligns to the interaction between organisms in this world, and within that create a system that is much like permanent culture, permaculture, that is based on team life, interacting, members interacting with one another to create a cohesive whole that will persist for all eternity. And that the basis of all this is what is best for all of us. Wouldn't that be something like what we're trying to attain, which we can't because it is so fragmented? As you said, one is advocating for animal reform, one is advocating for plant reform, one is advocating for this and this, but never see the interrelationship within the different members of that team life. So money, I would suggest, a living income guarantee, which is, of course, a way where we can have money to buy basic necessities, and then a provision for more if we need more money, because that way the people who has got a lot more, let's say the billionaires, for example, will kind of work with the other members as equals rather than as perpetrators of greed or things like that, but rather to come down to and see things as others see it, so that then they will work with us more as equals. What do you say to that?
Yeah, I mean, I think, I totally agree. That's a major point in the whole movement of everything here is the money, is how the money exists, because like that's directly tied to, the creation and or the destruction of our planet, because the money is so much so attached to the movement and how we exist in relationship to one another here. I mean, in a lot of ways, the money exists kind of like as the, well, like the medium of exchange here, because we're so out of touch, out of sync with ourselves here, starting with ourselves, and thus everything else here, is that we can't function really without some sort of law and order, which is set up in the guise of like money as the medium which moves us. Now, unfortunately, what this reveal showcases in the nature of like how we've accept ourselves to exist in relationship with one another here, like as humanity, is there's a lot of tragedy within and as like the way we've legally structured ourselves here, where oftentimes even just the very subject of law gets kind of like avoided because, you know, like we're bringing up here, there's so many subjects of importance here in this world that, you know, influence the whole, you know, capacity or ability for, you know, a sort of like status standing. And ultimately, to get, you know, status standing as like, what's the status of the earth like as a whole, because we're all a part of it, and it's such a conglomeration of relationships working together. Money for sure I see is like a pivotal point within all that, because it's kind of like the glue in holding, justifying things together the way they are. Now, an interesting point about, you know, like this money regard like this is it's not a point of blame or whatever, but it's more like it's a tool. Now, an interesting point and correlation that I see is like synonymous with the money point is in fact our words. That like our words, like our, you know, individualized like vocabulary as humans, so much so reflect money. Because if we look at like how, you know, money exists in terms of like having like a debt to it, you know, use your debit card as like your debt card, and, you know, the taxes, the way the taxes exist on the money is that there's always like a particular charge about the money, and that kind of reflects our word and world relationships here, as how we exist, you know, and accept and allow the money and the relationships to exist here. Because in our individual like word and world relationships, we're so, you know, conflicted within ourselves, like, you know, being pro this, anti this, like, you know, I eat meat, I don't eat meat, kind of like we're creating like all these different points of discrepancy within our word and world relationships, as like just all these oppositions, as like the finger pointing here, the finger pointing here, blame. And I think, you know, the consequence of that is that, you know, we have a seriously lame world that we humans like have the capacity to stand as like the real guardians, custodians of, but it's a process really of like first recognizing, you know, our own individual words and how we exist within those words and our world relationships. Because I think so much so the way we think is based on external looking around and making sense of the different relationships exist, and then to from there like making sense of this relationship or that relationship, we then like go into, you know, relationship as that point, and the starting point is not necessarily so structurally sound, but it's the way that we see, you know, apparently works, like from the business sense, the way, you know, big business exists. If you're to be successful in how you're making your profits, you know, basically you got to like lie, cheat, steal, kill, whatever, just be like, you know, the winner essentially, like do whatever it takes. Now I see there with the whole internet, I think it being like a tool that's come out to really aid and assist with this like slow down in communication point, where we're able to look and regard different things more easily. And I think we're seeing like a bit of a shift between the masses, you know, maybe not like the ruling elite, if you will, in terms of like those with the most to lose in the way the design of things are at present with regards to law and money. But I think we're seeing like a real shift in the masses in adjusting, changing our relationships, that, you know, it's like the whole idea of a leaderless movement, if you will, and that what that means is that, you know, everybody exists as that point of leader, as teacher and student, and what's best for all is like oriented in that sense of community, that sense of togetherness. Like together we are strong, separate we are weak. And yeah.
And also, I would like to mention the part that the education system is playing in all this is that, we go to school to learn being a chef, and we are taught this and that. And then you see chefs on TV, they shout on other chefs if they don't cook the food right, you see. And dairy is part of that, because dairy is being used, meat from cows, which is beef, plus other dairy products like cheese and milk. Even if you're cooking vegetarian or vegan, it doesn't make you more than these chefs that are cooking with meat. Because see, all of you, all of us, we are cooking from a point of taste, and even that, the excesses can really, you can see the excesses in how we use food, right there. And so the chefs are also part of that. They study from an institution that also gives them curriculum and text, and textbooks about what to do and how they should see food. So it's the whole system that has to be reformed here, you see. I can see that when I taught myself how to cook again, after I had been through this vegan, vegetarian, healthy eating craze, it was very difficult for me to come back to eating meat again, because I have to redefine how it is to cook, and I don't know that. All I know is what was taught to me. I copied everything from everyone. So, so I recommend that in the education system, we look at this. We look at creating a way for children and adults who are studying to create this a space for them to recreate themselves, without textbooks. I mean, maybe one subject will be something like that, rather than the whole subjects being, because then you will be able to see the difference. And I really learned a lot when I was relearning how to cook.
Interesting, Jim. Your sharing there kind of emphasizes to me a little bit just the whole way of living, and opening up the question, what in fact is like a practical way to live here in this world. What's come up so far in our discussion is in looking at different points of industry and like major systems, whether it be the law system, the money system, the education system. We could bring up the military system. We could, all these major systems. What's fascinating, like, about all of these things is that I know for myself, like, I could relate in initially having curiosity about the different subjects, like, related to life here on this planet, is that in beginning my investigations, initially it was kind of like, aha, like, this is the reason why shit is fucked up. And so then I would, like, kind of point the finger and be like, oh, it's this, or it's this, and then kind of create myself and sort of like, well, perpetuate my own disharmony within it as that point, not recognizing like how I exist as a representation of of all that exists in this world, and that, you know, it's not really so much about a point of blaming this or that, but seeing, learning, realizing like how these different relationships exist. And you know what to me is the common thread is so much so like, you know, everything is fucked up, you know, like including ourself. Like it's like we're all fucked in this process here, and it's so difficult to even regard that, you know, that regard to say that like you're all fucked. Like, you know, starting with like, you know, yourself, like you're the source of the fuckness.
Yeah, actually.
Yeah, because, you know, I think this is like just a major ego dilemma we're all faced with, because it's like, no, but they're more fucked. And that kind of is like a tone the movie Cowspiracy takes, is like, wait a second. You know, this point of agriculture is more fucked than this point of pollution through like our transportation relationships. So let's emphasize more attention on this fucked up point, which is cool, because I mean, if we reflect that back to ourselves, if you have like a major like fucked up dysfunction about your character here, it's pretty cool that you address that, you know, as the elephant in the room like point, as opposed to going to the points that are not so fucked, you know, first. But, you know, to the same, another point of consideration on that is to sort out an issue that's extremely fucked. It may, to get to the understanding how to sort out that like huge problem, you know, it will be easier to sort out the issues that are not so problematic, because the solution is more simple and easy in its approach, because the point is not, you know, so huge kind of thing. And I see each of us as individuals can relate that approach to ourselves here, like as, you know, fixing, you know, like our own dysfunctions, if you will, like for instance, like how we exist as our words, you know, like the emotions, feelings about particular things. And, you know, when I say that, it's not to say like, no, now you go numb to everything or whatever, but it's to more, you know, it's to actually just kind of realign yourself, realize how we so much so exist as disharmony within so many things, as like our words, as our notes, the sounds we make, how our body resonates, and to in fact like realign ourselves in harmony as these points, so that we're not so like separated. And I think as we take responsibility for the points that are, you know, more obvious, as like the smaller points, we, you know, are then able to like take on like bigger, more challenging points about our own character, like the points we've been suppressing about ourselves, hiding from more and more so. And as we do that, like I see that as being like the pivot point as our movement here in and as this world, is that the more we're taking on like at an individual level, like internally, the more we're able to like take on externally as our participation, movement, cooperation, as our like externally shared reality.
With regards to words, I can also see that reading other people's textbooks in schools, you know, you kind of get into this copying mode where you memorize these things and you can't sort of create your own redefined words. You can't, because you're just an information copying machine. You know, how can that machine with that limit that you post on yourself work in an expanded way? So I also would like to throw in here the fact that we are being taught how to cook this and how to, you know, the nutrition and the effects of not having dairy in our food, for example, and blaming disease. I also want to point out, because we cannot blame disease, because everything is a consequence outflow of what we're doing. So I would like to also say that our concept of ourselves. If you don't know who you are, commonsensically, Mike, and then you go to school, and then they're gonna shove on your face these textbooks from someone else that you will have to actually memorize. How are you gonna do? Like, oh, to me, that's what happened to me. It's like, wait a minute, what's going on? And because they're saying fast, fast, you gotta do your assignment fast. You gotta read this book. You kind of go fast and read it without really understanding because you don't even know who you are. The teachers do not even know who they are. I mean, Mike, this is like the base of the problem we're looking here. And we're, as you said, we're just fucking so, but we have to get out of this fuckness, and we have to first admit it, and then make sense of things and embrace everything that we also. I want to plug in the School of Ultimate Living is really doing some nice things there, introducing redefining words. And so I would like to look forward to the creation of that school, that we can learn who we are within the words we speak.
Awesome, June. Awesome, June. Yeah, I think we've summarized this movie and so much more within that, like kind of very holistic like perspective on self-reflection and external reflection and seeing our participations here in this world, and to get out of the commonly just accepted polarization like viewpoint as either being for this or against this, and just that war mentality that is so common in just like our feeling, our emotion, as just the reactionary play out of perpetuating our own and our own fuckness here as the world and as ourself. And I think, it's funny. It's like you laugh as I say this so much so, which
I would like to redefine the word fuck, actually.
Well, before you do, I'd just like to say, this is kind of what's funny about this, is that because we're dealing, there's like so much fucked up shit, we can use like the comedy of it here as the humor, like to have a sense of humor in taking responsibility and in developing our capacity for responsibility, for all the various things that are here. Because I mean, really, it's when you consider the the extent of the shit here, like how fuck shit is. I mean, I think really you have to have a sense of humor in order to be here. Because if you don't have a sense of humor, and if you don't have a sense of humor, it's like basically you're probably going to kill yourself in some way or another. Well, you are.
Yeah.
I think that's kind of like an epiphany for me here in the moment, is that that maybe is one of the biggest problems, June, maybe to summarize, is that there's not enough sense of humor here, is that humor is not well enough understood, so that the world exists as like the most awful joke ever, because we don't like get it, like we don't understand like how to laugh and have a good time, that has like a real regard for everyone, all life here, in a way that like jokes can best be shared. So it's kind of like this fucking whole existence is like the worst joke ever, and we're all in it, like all of us is like the big dirty asshole, and it's a shitstorm, yet nobody wants to like get shit on, yet not realizing that each of us is like a complete piece of shit.
But what we can do is just make sense of everything, and know who we are as organisms interacting with one another, and through that have fun doing that, have fun recreating ourselves in a way that we will be able to expand. And as we expand the world. And of course, within that is word definition. I would like to also point out one thing, that in www.ecofed.com, there are animal interviews that I find really amazing. So check that out, because this is about the cow. And yeah, there are so many animal interviews that are so fun to listen to.
Awesome, June. Okay, everyone. Thanks for tuning in this week. Not sure what the movie topic will be for next week, but please do check the Facebook VIP Lite group. The link is in the description here, because we will let you know before the Hangout broadcast what the next topic is. And also feel free to show up there to make a comment suggestion on you know, what you'd like to see as a movie, TV series, documentary discussed. And if you'd like to participate, contact me. Yeah. All right, June.
See ya.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.